I'm so glad you're here. This is a replay of a live training I did inside the OTs for Pelvic Health Facebook group with Lindsay Vestal, and I wanted to make sure that everyone gets access to it. Pelvic health is such an incredibly fulfilling specialty, and it's growing so much. I've been training OT since 2018, and my goal is to have over 10,000 OTs trained by the year 2030. I'm so glad you're here learning about this specialty. I hope that you can join us in the OTs for Pelvic Health Facebook group with me, Lindsay Vestal. I will link to the group below in the show notes and description. Thank you so much. Welcome to our weekly OT Empower Hour, where we all get together, we roll up our sleeves, we ask questions of one another that just continually challenges us to grow as practitioners and as human beings. Today's topic is a really hot one, and I'm so excited to talk about it. It's one that I feel like comes up so often on our Facebook group, and it's all about how to get a fieldwork student, what to do with that fieldwork student. And I have to admit that I could not imagine speaking to a better person about this. I want to introduce my lovely guest, who is Kirsten Spurrier. She is the owner of the Perinatal Pelvis in Hillsborough, North Carolina, which coincidentally is where Doug and I got married. Kirsten started her pelvic health journey after her own experience with birth trauma. And she actually opened the doors to her private practice in October 2021. Kirsten really strives to help moms feel strong, functional, and confident in their bodies while experiencing compassionate and holistic care. Kirsten, welcome to OT Empower Hour. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I have to tell everybody that you're currently at a lactation networking event in Raleigh, North Carolina, and you have graciously joined us to have this conversation.
Yes. So they're doing like their conference and then they come in and see vendors. And so this is like their time that they're doing their conference. So I'm like, I have the break. Let's chat.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your time. True to all entrepreneurs, we're often multitasking, and you're a brilliant example of that. So thank you for being here. I know that people joining us are going to have lots of questions because we're going to be talking about it today from the perspective of you, which is, an accomplished occupational therapist who's had students. I imagine there will be students joining us as well as people like yourself who, are interested in taking on a student, want to kind of understand a little bit more about the ins and outs. So I just want to say we welcome all of the questions. If you've got them, kind of throw them in the chat. I'll be monitoring them and then sharing them with Kirsten as we go along in today's conversation. And also, she's an active member of our Facebook group. So if you have questions as we go along on the replay, please put them in, and I have no doubt we'll be able to answer them as well. So, Kirsten, I always like to kick things off with an icebreaker question because it lets you and I know that people are joining us, which absolutely energizes us. And then from a replay perspective, it also kind of lets me know what topics are getting the most interest so I can continue to bring things that people really want to learn about on these weekly meetings that happen every Thursday, usually at noon. So, Kirsten, I'm going to kick it over to you and ask you, okay, so it's currently May. I know in North Carolina, because I lived there, you're probably starting to get warmer temperatures. What is your go-to beverage of choice, like mid-afternoon on a hot summer day?
So I do not drink coffee. So a lot of people, I drink a lot of water. But I have kind of fallen into the sweet tea thing. But I cut myself off. Like I'll go for a little bit and then be like, oh, that's way too much. So I am a half sweet, half unsweet tea with lemon if I allow myself to do that.
I love it. Well, I have to tell you, I can speak from experience. North Carolina has amazing sweet tea. Yeah. It is unparalleled. So I went to undergrad at NC State in Raleigh, which is where I met Doug. And Like that was my go-to. Like my roommate and I, who was best friend at my wedding in Hillsborough, we would like I swear for years that was our sustenance. Not ideal for a pelvic floor therapist, but it was
So
amazing.
then where did you get your sweet tea from though? Because that's the thing too, is like, where do you get your sweet tea from?
So I'm a big Bojangles girl.
Okay. See, my husband's a Bojangles fan. Bojangles is too sweet for me. I can't do Bojangles.
For a long time, it was the perfect amount of sweetness. And then as I got older, it's now more of like we call it half cut, like half sweet, half unsweet. And even now, when I went back to visit my in-laws who are living in Durham, it's even that's too sweet for me.
Sweet.
All right. For those of you joining us, let us know what your favorite summertime beverage is. You can tell I'm like gearing up. Like my kids are finishing school in the next week and a half, and I've got summer on the brain. So that was today's icebreaker question. Okay, Kirsten. So give us a little bit of orientation. Up to this point, how many students have you had?
So in my pelvic floor business, I have only had one capstone student, and I'm planning to have another one in January. Most fieldworks, I don't know, whoever has done fieldworks in the past and has students it takes some timing. Like people are contacting me for 2024, 2025 placements right now. So this one in January has been scheduled for almost a year. But before I started my practice, I was working at Duke Hospital, and a part of my position was being a mentor for an OT residency. And so I had a student every year for 3 months, and that was OT residency. So they had already graduated their OT program and were getting further knowledge in acute care. So I would have them for 3 months. And then if I took a fieldwork student beyond that, was another 3 months. So I had years that I had students with me for 6 months out of the year.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So that helps me understand a little bit more about sort of like your journey on taking on a student with your private practice. But I still have to ask, like, how did you know you were ready? Because that's a question I get a lot from the OTs on this page, from OTs who have taken OT pioneers. Like, how do you know when you're ready to take on a student?
So I don't know, like looking back, if I'm ever really ready. Like it was a part of my job description that I didn't fully really know what I was getting myself into. I just kind of did it. And then when I went into wanting to get into this field, I was looking for somebody that I could just go and observe or follow for a few days to see like, hey, can I do this myself? And there was nobody out there. And granted, it was like during COVID, but still there was nobody that I could just go and see, like, is pelvic floor therapy outpatient something that I wanted to do? So really the only experience I had in my pelvic floor experience was from what I got from continuing ed courses before I opened up my practice. So when I opened up my practice, I knew I really wanted to give opportunity to students to let them know what we do and what it looks like. So I think it's just having that background of it's always been a part of my career that it's kind of an expectation. Whether you're ready or not, you just do it. And it's been such a gift to me in my learning throughout the years. So I just have always really enjoyed doing that.
I think the part that you said that really resonated with me is that there's a deficit out there. That students need this exposure to not only solidify their journey and their trajectory, but it's the way we continue to grow as a profession, right? I mean, exposure is everything. I remember like back when, I don't know, you're in high school and, career counselors are talking to you and what's their biggest advice? Go and shadow, go find someone that you can just walk the day in the life of. And it's like, if we don't have people like you who are willing to take on a student, not knowing the protocols, not knowing the playbook, not even really sure necessarily exactly what they may be doing day in and day out. Like if we wait for that certainty, we're probably missing a lot of opportunities for OT students to get that exposure.
Yeah, well, and so I'm working with like the OTD program at Duke, and it's incredible how many students, and I'm sure you've seen this, of how many students are really interested in pelvic health, but they can't get fieldworks in pelvic health. They can't get capstone projects in pelvic health. So I bet there's going to be a lot of that interest that dies out because they go to other
Yes.
fieldwork. Then they get opportunities for jobs right after. And it's like, oh, well, pelvic floor therapy gets put on the back burner. And it's like, well, if we had the fieldworks to capitalize on those students to put them into this profession,
Yeah.
we would be going at such a higher rate of getting more OTs into this profession.
Oh, I love that. You said that exactly right, because I think the thing about being an OT is that, and I felt this with, even though I got into OT school knowing I wanted to do pelvic health, every time I was exposed through field work or, a guest speaker coming in to lecture, I was like, I love this. Like, I love this aspect of OT. I could totally, I'm still eyes on the prize. I'm still going to do pelvic health, but I could see another version of myself, kind of like, what is that movie with Gwyneth Paltrow, Mirror or something? I forget, but you can see these tracks of your life. And I loved so much about OT innately that I could have seen myself going in those trajectories. So you bring up a really good point. Like, these students could be interested in pelvic health, but because of practical exposure, end up going a different route. You're spot on, Kirsten. So can you share with us and kind of demystify a little bit, like, what a day in the life of a student is like with you, the mundane, the glamorous? Give it to us all, like just a nice overview of what it would be like as a student to shadow and to work with you.
Yeah. So I really make sure from all of the good and the bad of students that I've had, is just really creating and solidifying a plan. So I really sit down usually the Friday before with the student and map out the next week. And communication is just so key, right? So they're coming in from recognizing they're coming from a student model, that they are being told what to do. So kind of treating them at first like that and being like, okay, so you're going to work on this project when I am working on my business computer stuff. And then anytime I have a patient, then they're observing me as they feel more comfortable in my practice, or they've seen that patient 2-3 times, I give them some responsibility in those sessions. And then make them write notes. I don't necessarily use those notes, but it's them practicing. So I'm very clear that you might be doing things that I don't use, right?
Mhm.
It's still your practice and still you having repetition to get better at this. And so then we analyze their performance with the patient, their note writing. If they haven't had as much hands-on experience, letting them try stuff on me. I set time apart every week to kind of do manual practice stuff with them and questions that have come up. Any kind of meetings that I have with other providers, they're coming with me and seeing how I network. Any mom group, community events, they're helping me be there for that. So they're kind of just like your sidekick all the time. But making sure that they have some stuff that they're also working on and that fills their day. So that's really it. I don't, with my practice, I'm not always there 8 to 4 o'clock or 9 to 4. And so on the days that I work from home, then I work out with their school that they get to work from home. And I just have to see the projects and the progression that they're working on.
So it sounds to me, I mean, that's beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that structure with us, because it definitely demystifies it. And so would you say to perhaps an OT who maybe doesn't have a full-time practice yet, right? Is maybe half fill or 3/4 of the way fill. Would you recommend that they should still consider taking on a student?
Yeah, like I took a student last summer and I had total probably 6 patients coming to see me. Like it was very small. It was not tons of patient care that they were observing, but if you are spending a full time of your amount of time on your practice, then I think you could still get a student, whether even if that is you're working mostly on the business side of it, marketing, social media, whatever you want. I think you could do that. I don't know what a school would think about if you're doing part-time somewhere else. That would be harder. Like even though I work PRN at Duke 1 day a week, my student could not follow me into that institution. So that would only be probably the harder thing, is if you aren't having a full job within your pelvic floor business. It doesn't really matter how many patients you're seeing.
Okay, that's great. So it doesn't matter how many patients you're seeing. And then back to what you said that was really key was like something about communication, right? So being able to communicate clearly, perhaps like, look, I can't guarantee how many hours will be client facing. It's going to be a little bit of social media. It's going to be business. It's going to be referral generating. It's kind of like you're stepping into the world of an entrepreneur, not always the world of a pelvic floor therapist. Would that be true?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I take capstone students from OTD programs.
Okay. And the other thing you said that really stuck out to me was like, they're your sidekick. So I'm imagining that something that's important too is that you guys jive, that personalities click. Do you have any tips for how you figured that out?
Yeah. Not having great experiences at some points. I would just say, like, you have to be able to, one, communicate to them and learn about how they communicate to you, and that you jive with them. I mean, I think I have people contact me quite often to see if I'm open to Fieldworks, and I say yes, but I do require like an interview process for longer placements, because we are in a 12 by 12 room together for a lot of days. And we have to be compatible to talk and have conversations. So I interview, I also require pre-courses before they come and have a rotation with me.
Okay, that's wonderful. And I think you shared with me the questions that you often ask during the interview process. So I will put those in the comments once we finish today. So for anyone looking to consider this process, these are some great questions that Kirsten uses as she's interviewing people to find out if they're a good fit for her practice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what are some what's a snapshot into some projects that you've had your students work on that were maybe like very productive for both your student and you, and then maybe in hindsight a project that was less than ideal?
Yeah. So capstone students work for practically the whole year before they come to you on their project. So they do at least both of the programs, and I've worked with 2 different schools. They do a task analysis of your program, and look at, strengths, weaknesses, and come up with their own project themselves.
That's really cool.
With collaboration with you of like, hey, what do you want done? But kind of have this big thing that they're working on. And so they're working on that before they get to you. So my last person kind of was a dual project. So she was in charge of improving my social media and running community outreach events. And so she did all of that through the whole 3 months that she was with me. And then she also did a postpartum sex guide that was a free guide that you now can find on my website. And so I would say both of those were successful. It's just how to get there is sometimes a little bit more clunky than you might expect, because they are coming from, oh, this is like an assignment and I need to get it done. And so I really work on transitioning those students into more of a professional lens of, I made her do blog post things to kind of get her voice into her writing and into her presentation, before she like did a whole, if I just said, oh, you're going to do a postpartum sex guide, it wouldn't have been as rich as if we really worked together to really bring more voice and personality into our work. But that's hard at first as a student, like knowing like, oh, I can have some opinions in my writing, and it doesn't have to just be this is the research, right? So that is a transition, and it takes a good 3 months to really work on something that is then a great project that you're both proud of. I would also say that I am very clear in that communication bit that I may not use every version of things that they present to me. Like as an entrepreneur, I create things and then there's some things I don't like, or some things I revise 3 months later. And I'm very clear about that because you're creating something doesn't mean it's going to get posted or going to get put on my website. It's something that we're working together, and that's okay. It's a creative process. It's not a assignment that gets a grade.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's like such an amazing opportunity for the students who work with you, because that is a transition. And perhaps this is exactly what these experiences are about, right? That transition from that very academic, rigorous driven world to more of what we experience when we're out in business and running our own practices. So that's wonderful. So one of the questions I see a lot come up on our Facebook group is, do students participate in client-facing care? What has been your stance on that so far?
So, for capstone students, there is no requirement of client or patient care. So that is why I do that. There are some capstones that aren't even followed by OTs. So your project and their project does not have to involve patient care. So then I think of it as that patient care is practically bonus to their experience. Like I said, make them do either your course or Laura Rowan's course or PF1 to have an awareness of what the pelvic floor is, so that when I'm doing internal pelvic floor work and I'm talking to the clients, that they understand where I'm at and what I'm actually doing. And then I give them the experience mostly with education, intake forms, standardized tests, and patient exercises. And so after we've done an initial evaluation, where would you take this patient? And then a lot of discussion around that behind the scenes of like, what exercises would you give that patient and why? Do you think that will be carried out in their daily life? And really trying to make them think through where they would take the patient before I tell them where I'm going to take the patient. And so giving them that hands-on experience, I think, is great. Again, I do a community kind of outreach program, educational programs, and I make them teach some classes, a part of that. But then on the flip side, if anybody's considering doing a Fieldwork 2 student, that is where they have a requirement to do patient care. So according to AOTA right now, you have to be able to take 100% of that therapist's caseload by the end of your field work. So whatever that is for your practice, it's really kind of based on that 40-hour work week, and a pretty strong inpatient care. Now, I think there are some programs out there, and I'm working, like, for example, with Duke to see if they will consider field work and adapt that patient care model into being more of like business care model, and that it's an entrepreneur plus patient care. And that's that they're doing more practical application as an entrepreneur, instead of a full just practicing clinical therapist. And that kind of qualifies as those hours,
Mhm.
and that they would take on that. And I think it just depends on your philosophy of how
Yeah.
you want your patients, if your patients are okay with it. So my patients, I always give them the choice because I'm a cash-based practice and they deserve to be treated by the person that they have come to pay for. So I usually don't have patients that deny their observation, but I do have some that are just like, no, I'd rather have you do everything. So,
Mhm.
and I am very clear with my students about that
Mhm.
their experience and their comfort overrides your student experience.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's exactly how I did things when I had students in my private practice. Thanks, Kristen. That's awesome. I
And I
have one
think
last
like, oh,
question
I
for
was
you.
going to add too of like, I
Please.
think fieldwork too could be ideal if you were in a
Mhm.
multi-practitioner business, because then you could share that student
Yes.
throughout, like if I had
Yeah.
2 or 3 other people, they would just be in the practice and
Mhm.
kind of follow a few from each of us. I think
Yeah.
that would be, that could be a really cool option too, if you had something like that.
Absolutely. And then you could see all the different treatment approaches, right? So, one of the things that I love talking about, and I know you were an OT Pioneer alumni, we talked about this a lot, which is there's not one way to do pelvic floor therapy. There's
Mhm.
your right way. And so, what's so cool about whether you're actually shadowing with a PT, which is sometimes the only option we have, or maybe a multi practitioner practice where there's a couple OTs, you're getting to see examples of the variety of ways that you can approach a client and approach the treatment session and even the evaluation. And what I love about that is it's just so expansive to know that there's so many ways. And when you kind of see it all, you're reflective and you're mindful of your own experience. And then you're able to approach that client with your best self and your most authentic self. And sometimes we don't know what that is until we have an opportunity to see what we really like, or maybe perhaps what we don't. And we do that through observation. So I do think that would be a really special experience to see multiple practitioners during that experience. So I have one last question for you. I want to invite anyone joining us live while we have Kirsten here before she heads back to her lactation event in Raleigh. If you have any questions for her, whether you're a student or a practitioner considering taking on a student, throw them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Replay, don't forget to tell us your favorite summer beverage, and of course, include any questions you have. So my last question for you, and again, thank you for sharing your time with us today. Hopefully you can still grab lunch.
No, you're good.
My question is, how do you go about getting a student? Like, what are the practical steps? I know it sounds like students have reached out to you, but what about people who maybe haven't had anyone reach out to them, or even for those that do, like, what are those practical steps that we do to actually get a student?
Yeah. So I would first look at what local OT programs are around your area. And you do not have to take a level 2 capstone student for 3 months to start out. Like I have a level 1 student coming to me in December for 1 week, and they don't have any requirements for patient care. They just get to observe you.
It's awesome.
And that's like a really easy, like they need, they're always looking for people. Um, I also had this semester that I helped out with I was a community partner for a research project, and they did a research project on my practice. And I was helping 4 students. I met with them over Zoom like 4 times. And it's just being involved in an OT program that they know that you're interested in helping out in any way that you can. Then they'll start kind of being like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And they'll reach out for you for your advice. And I think also through the Facebook group, there's quite a few students that reach out and ask for field works. and being like, hey, if you're willing to travel, here's my business and this is where I'm at. And in terms of the Fieldwork 2 versus capstone, I think it's also working with that particular school. Every school is a little different, and some people don't really realize that when they go to OT school, that how they, how their programs kind of differ. But working with their fieldwork coordinators at the school to say, okay, this is what my practice is. What could I provide a student? How would that look? What's the requirements? And really having some inward reflection of what you really can handle. I think we have this misinterpretation a little bit that students are going to just like help us get some projects done. And I think they do. I really they do, but I would say they're probably still more work to have them in your practice than just putting aside 3 days to do that project yourself is probably faster than having a student do it. I would say I keep doing it because it keeps me very current. And I love that. I love the challenge of the questions that they come in with. I love putting those questions back on them and making them research it and then bringing it back to me. And they are coming from another generation of OTs that are coming up. And so it keeps me so much more current in my practice. And as a provider and like what OTs are learning in school now. And I just love that challenge. And so another thing I wanted to point out is there is a AOTA fieldwork coordinator education or fieldwork educator certification workshop. And I've taken this course and I thought it was so helpful. Like if you want to know how to grade, and like the rubrics of how they're graded in school, what would happen if you had a student that was not compliant with your protocols or was having any behavioral things. I mean, they give you all the tools to work out situations that are not ideal, but sometimes that you get put into, and who to contact and what makes people have to retake a field work or those types of issues. And it was just a great course to take and be knowledgeable about those things.
I love hearing they have that support because those are not things that we're expected to know. No one's ever had a conversation with us about that. We want the best for these students and we assume the best, but let's be realistic, right? There are going to be some situations that present themselves that are less than optimal. And so I love that AOTA has put that structure into place. So that's fantastic. And I also loved hearing, and I felt the spark in you, Kirsten, when you talked about the part that you really love and staying current is so important. So I thank you for also shedding a light on that. Carolyn is joining us and she does have a question for you. Yeah. She says, right now, the company she works for does not offer the opportunity to interview students ahead of field work. They just place them with you. What would you recommend to address with her company to pick students?
I would say, could you put then at least some requirements that they have to take a course for sure? Like, can they at least make sure that they take Herman and Wallace or I'm blanking on Laura's course or OT Pioneers? Like, can they, even if it's virtual, like your course, like
yeah.
Make it in person, at least have some knowledge of the pelvis, because no OT programs are teaching that. And so I would say that, and a desire to want to be in pelvic floor therapy. And I don't know what her company is, if it's all therapies or if it is just specifically pelvic floor. And even working with the school to be like, can you please just send people that are interested in this field? Because there's so many pelvic floor, there's so many OTs that want to get those placements. We don't need to have people that know that they want to work in peds or they know they want to work in acute care. and not taking up one of those spots.
Mhm. Carolyn, I would be curious to know a little bit more about sort of the reason for your question. Like, what have you experienced that was maybe lackluster or an area for improvement for your desire to want to know a little bit more about interviewing, so that we could kind of help problem solve a little bit. Okay, she wrote, okay, thank you. Great recommendations. It's OT and PT and pelvic health in an outpatient setting that she's in.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the company can't, I would say can, are you having them come from one certain school? And then going kind of to the school and saying, hey, we could just maybe set a requirement of what they come in with, or if,
Mhm.
the OT coordinator or the fieldwork coordinators at those schools are so incredible and usually work with a lot of different placements. And that might be a place to look at.
Mhm. Yeah, and I can shed a little bit of perspective too on this, Carolyn. I've had a number of OTs come to me and say that maybe there wasn't funding for courses. So something like Herman and Wallace or OT Pioneers, or even Laura's course, like that requires funding, right? So some workarounds that could be MedBridge. I have had 2 courses that just came out last month that are about constipation as well as introductory coursework into pelvic health. Very often they already have a MedBridge account, so those would be free options. I know that Tiffany Lee has some free courses for students on, I think it's called occupationaltherapy.com. And then here's the really cool thing is I have over 200 episodes now of free OT and power hours like this. So I've had many, like at least, goodness gracious, just this past month, I think I've had close to 8 or 9 OTs contact me and say, I have laid out a trajectory of not all of your Empower hours, because that's way too many, but like a half a dozen or a dozen that I require they watch. That's kind of that foundation. And then they go back and they have a little discussion about it. They have like they discuss, well, what did you think about this? And they have their questions written up ahead of time that elicit that conversation that they want to bring out the ethos of their particular setting based on some of the information that I seeded. So that's kind of a free way, Carolyn, to get information in the hands. That's kind of that base requirement. There's also my podcast that they can listen to. And then of course, any of those OT-led courses that Kirsten and I recommended are more of the full version, paid version of that base requirement. So they're coming in and you're not having to answer some of the more basic questions. They're walking in and they're able to kind of take that next step in that with the client in front of them, or, discussing case studies, so that that knowledge can continue to grow, because there's so many ways to get that base knowledge already covered.
Yeah. Well, and there's some OTs, really students, and just recognize this, that don't want to do internal work. Like the student that's coming to me this next January, she is not certain that she wants to do internal pelvic floor work. She wants to do something in the roles of like sexuality. And so that's what her big project is going to be on at my clinic. So I did not require her to do an in-person pelvic floor course, because if that's not a desire of hers now, why go do it? But I did say I would like you to then do a virtual one that you actually have at least seen the bones and the muscles. But that's a great idea, Lindsay, is maybe even coming up with like a dozen of the Empower hours for new students, of like, these are the top topics that we could send. Even like my fieldwork one student, they were asking, well, do you need to interview them? I was like, no, but I want them to at least look at a pelvis before they come, having
Right.
some kind of knowledge of what I'm talking about would be helpful. So it would be cool
Yeah.
to have just a little, like, these are the top 6 or the top 12 Empower hours to start out with.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that idea. Carolyn says she's under a hospital system, so it's either a yes or a no option. And yes, certain schools we take on, like Emory University or local schools. She also loves that option with MedBridge for prospective students, because funding is usually an issue.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. If there aren't any other questions for people to discuss, I love this conversation, Kristen. I'm so grateful for you sharing your expertise with us on this, because There's so many questions. I have a feeling that all 5,000 people on this Facebook group would love to take on a student, but we just sometimes aren't sure what to do and how to support them. We want to do right by them. And I love how you have showed up. You didn't always have all the answers, but you were driven by your passion to not only learn yourself, but your passion to fill a need, to fill a gap that's out there, which is the fact that just OTs need more exposure and they need to see what we're doing in order to really kind of move our profession forward and to grow in size and numbers, right? That's what we want to see. It's the whole purpose of this group and of my podcast is like, I just want to see as many OTs as possible out there serving our clients because I really innately believe this world is a better place when we have more OTs in it practicing pelvic health. So thank you for building that initiative, growing that initiative, and for all that you do. You're such an inspiration.
Well, thank you so much. This is great to be here.
Awesome. Well, you get back to your event. Best of luck, enjoy, and we'll see you all next week for the next OT Empower Hour.
All right, bye.
Bye.